Hello and welcome to the Indie Bandits podcast. I'm Joe and I'm joined by Jimmy and Archie today. How are you, Jim?
I'm pretty good, thank you very much. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. A few technical hitches which hopefully won't make it into the podcast, but we'll see by the time I get round to editing this. How about yourself, Archie?
I'm alright, cheers. Cracking on.
So before we get started with today's show, I thought we'd just go through the running order. So we'll have a quick bants about what's been going on over on our website in the crack on. Look at some of the few games from our demo disc article. Then we'll talk about some moderately current affairs, namely Google Stadia and Scalpers, before going on to a new segment that we've devised where we've sort of asked the community on Twitter to share advice. Thought this would be a good idea because, as listeners will know, we are not devs. We are fans and just people who would like to celebrate indie games. So to help devs out, we've asked our community, and hopefully we'll have a discussion of some of the points they made on our question when we get round to that. Then we should be talking about the game we've been playing this month, Nuts, a stylized first-person narrative game where you watch squirrels, and we'll find out whether or not that's as exciting as it sounds, or maybe there's something more to it than maybe meets the eye. If yous lads are both ready to move on with that, then we'll just crack on.
Alright.
Excellent. So before we go on to the first part of the episode, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. And if you're a dev, tell your fellow devs about us. If you're a fan of indie games, obviously you can stick around and recommend us to some friends as well. We've also got all the social media channels. It's a good idea if you are a dev to check us out, particularly on Twitter, where we retweet and share games on Wednesdays and Saturdays in particular. Or you can head on over to our Discord, where you can shamelessly plug your own stuff and also just share any old crap you find on the internet that you think's cool, funny, or a bit different. So this month on the website we've got a few new article types that I thought we'd get through, where we have indies you may have missed. This is a new article where we will highlight games that have just come out. We are continuing with our demo disc article, in which you can find a few indie games that you can play for free and try out. And we've had a couple of reviews. We reviewed Hades, which we talked about on the podcast last time round, so go back and listen to that if you haven't already. And we've got the review up for Nuts, the game we are going to be talking about today. So if you want to go read the review first, then we'll get into this a bit more later on. So, from the demo disc, we've each picked one that we thought was pretty cool. So I'll go to you first, Archie. What would be your... We don't have pick of the podcast anymore, but what would be your pick of the demo disc? What's a particular highlight you've seen on the articles this month?
Well, I thought Speed Limit looked fun, because it seemed to remind me of... what the heck was that samurai game we played, last year's time?
Katana Zero.
It kind of looked like something in vein of that. I don't know, it seemed to describe itself as a fast-paced, arcadey type of game. It's got pixel art, so I guess it loses points for having that. But yeah, just looked, something that would be a bit of fun, easy to pick up and play.
Might add that we don't hate pixel art, but there is certainly
It's just a bit overdone, isn't it?
Yes, there's certainly an over-reliance on it, and I can, devs will probably be able to explain why that is. But I think, it's probably the easiest to make look sort of good, but you're not going to stand out in a crowded marketplace if everyone does pixel art. Unless it's a very good pixel art, of course. So what about yourself, James? Anything that stood out to you?
If I pronounced this correctly, I thought Dorf Romantic looked really interesting, completely in contrast to what Archie just said. It's the fact that it's not pixel art that really made it stand out to me amongst all the ones that were in the demo disc this time round. It looks very, very nicely put together. It looks like it's described itself anyway as a peaceful building strategy and puzzle game. I'm assuming that means there's no conflict to deal with during the game, but the art style looks really nice, and it looks like one of those sort of easy-going games that you could probably lose an hour or two in and have a relaxing time playing it, but it looks pretty cool to me.
Yeah, I was just playing this afternoon, actually, the demo, that is. Mm-hmm. It's going into early access in March. And it sort of reminds me, if you remember the board game Catan, or I guess it's called Catan in the States, it reminds me of when you set that game up and you just have all the tiles in a random stack, and then you just start allocating them into the board. It works sort of like that, and I thought that was kind of cool. And I'd like to highlight, I'm going to get this horribly wrong, I'm going to say chiaroscuro. I'm sure that's an art style, right? That's a Renaissance art style. It's definitely an Italian word, right?
From the word and from the art style of it, I think it's that it's the use of like extreme darks and extreme light, isn't it? Like it's very contrast style, high contrast.
Yes, it's a high contrast. Exactly, that's the one. Yeah, and I was having a little blast of that, and it's a little platformer Metroidvania, and that's sort of like right down my alley. I really enjoyed. I was a big fan of the game Celeste, and also Super Metroid and Axiom Verge. So anything that sort of combines that is always going to be high on my list of games to keep an eye on. So anyone listening, go check out the demo disc article. Obviously, check out the indies you may have missed article as well. But in particular, these are the three we reckon you should have a look at. And of course, if you for Archie's game Speed Limit, not Archie's game. Archie didn't make this game, or did you, Archie?
Possibly.
No, Archie's not claiming that he made this game, by the way, just
Not
before we get
either.
sued. Well, before you get sued, Archie. But that game came out on the 17th of February, so if you play it and like the demo, then obviously it's already available to buy, and you can get straight into it if you like what you see in the demo. So he's ready to talk about the news, lads, and get into the nitty-gritty.
Let's do it!
Yeah, if you recall earlier on in the month, Google announced that it has closed its own first-party studio before it released any single games, which, given this studio was, I assume, created to make games for Stadia, what does this mean for Stadia? Archie, I'll go to you first.
My guess is that it means they potentially don't understand how to make games because they've never done it before, and they might not see the worth of their own product. Possibly both of those things.
So is that killed Stadia? I know Stadia's still about, but is this like the final nail in its coffin?
Google's first-party studio hadn't proven themselves, so it's that didn't kill Stadia. But I think, they've got third-party support from other developers. If they left, that would kill Stadia, but they haven't. So you say killed Stadia, but from what I'm aware, Stadia's barely even alive at this point. I don't know a single soul who uses it, and I never see a single thing talking about it.
Are they pulling the plug on the life support on it then? If it's barely alive as is?
No, I don't think so. I think they'll still invest in it for at least a couple more years to see where it goes. But for them, they probably just, I don't know, it's probably one of those things where they don't really understand. It's like, look at what Amazon Studios just did recently. Didn't they release a game and they released it and it's already they've closed all its servers down within 6 months or something? But it just seems like a company that's trying to jump on this market that's exploding at the minute, possibly because of the pandemic. And they probably don't know what they really want to make, what trends they're trying to follow, or even how do we approach this. They could hire talented people, but if the people at the top don't really know what they want out of the studio, then what's the point of the studio? That's what it seems like to me.
So I'll go to you, James. They've claimed that they're going to focus on third-party games. Then does Archie's statement ring true, or what do you make out of all of this?
I think it's probably just a sensible business decision from them. If there aren't enough people playing or buying membership or passes for Google Stadia, then maybe they should concentrate on getting those numbers up before they start pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into making their own games. So possibly they've just decided the launch didn't go as well as expected. Not as many people as they were hoping decided to jump on board with it. So they thought, right, let's make this product as good as we can possibly make it. Let's get more games on the platform. Let's give people more of a reason to become Stadia customers. And then if they manage to build that up, then they can look at making exclusives for their own platform. But until they've got a healthy user base, there's no point in wasting all that money trying to make games for a platform that no one's playing on.
Yep.
Well, gentlemen, that seems like two very level-headed responses, and I don't know if that has any place on the internet.
Are people actually be getting upset over this, though?
People haven't been getting upset, per se.
Who gets upset?
But what they like to do on the internet is go extreme in either way. So obviously, the second this story broke, a lot of the talk online was that Stadia's over. This is the final nail in its coffin, and you may as well just say goodbye to it. What a waste of time and money.
Yeah, actually, in a way, like, if you've invested in Stadia and you've put some money into it, you know, you're one of those first-time buyers, you want to put a bit of trust in this new product or whatever, and Google's already showing signs of, like, a lack of interest in their own product, and from a company that is, from what I'm being told at least, pretty, known for kind of pulling the plugs on things very quickly if they don't work. If you put money into this, and, like, next year, these things are going to become inaccessible to you, or no longer supported. Like, I mean, yeah, I can understand why there might be a bit of kind of like frustration. I mean, nothing's happened just yet, but it doesn't bode well for the future of the platform, does it?
I wouldn't fully agree with that.
Okay.
I think it's just a business decision from them. If anything,
Oh, yeah.
You could argue that actually it might bode well for Stadia owners, because instead of Google spending money trying to make their own games, I mean, from what this looks like to me is, it's nothing to do with Stadia, it's their game development studio that they've shut down, right?
Yeah.
So if anything, they're actually concentrating more on Stadia and less on making their own games. So if I was a Stadia owner, I might think, actually, what this means is over the next 6 to 12 months, we might get a ton more games on this platform. Like, if they're just going to concentrate on building partnerships with other publishers and get loads more games on here, then that's actually better, because I can't imagine there was too many Stadia owners who were like, I'm buying this for Google's unproven game studio. Like, they bought it because they wanted to play games using internet connection, or so that they didn't have to buy expensive consoles that they might not be able to afford. Like, this actually would make me think, great, they're not going to waste their time spending a ton of money on trying to make their own games. They're going to make this a platform worth buying, and then if it does become successful and they do feel confident enough, that the exclusive Google games will be like the USP, won't it? It'll be like, you can only get these games if you play Stadia. And by the way, if you don't want to play our games, we've still got every other major game that's ever been released also on this platform as well. So I don't know if it's a bad thing. It might be. 6 months' time, 12 months' time, they might just shut this whole thing down. But from what I think, I would actually argue that this might actually just mean that Google concentrates more on giving people a reason to buy Stadia rather than worry about making their own games.
Well, to add to this, Google has announced 100 more games coming over the course of this year, which does include FIFA 21. So whether you love FIFA or not, it's a big title that they're adding to their roster of games. And they're also releasing Chromebooks with Stadia pre-installed on it. So anyone buying a Chromebook will already have access to Stadia. And if Archie's just recently bought a laptop, and I think if you've been laptop shopping, Archie, that Chromebooks are fairly cheap and not designed for playing games.
No.
But if they have Stadia on them, this is a way for people with a very low barrier to entry to play, essentially. I mean, FIFA 21 is a big title. There's 99 others essentially that they're going to be adding.
You see a low barrier of entry, but you still need a relatively good internet connection in order to kind of like have this system function to a degree of which, like gives you something that's better than what that's already available on maybe like a high-end PC or even a medium-range PC or on the PS5 or the Xbox or even the PS4, Like when Red Dead came out for Stadia, like, the biggest thing was that this can't even run 4K because the compression you get through the internet, even at the highest internet speeds, can't give you a 4K resolution,
Yes, but I might add, if you're buying a Chromebook, you're probably not looking for 4K gaming. Admittedly, you're right that this kind of player probably won't be investing in high-speed internet either, but they might have internet that's high enough to play it at the low end and also just access these games. So, there might be someone who just will never buy something that's expensive enough to run Red Dead on it.
I guess.
So having a Chromebook where they can still play it, that might turn them around to the whole idea.
Yeah, that sounds like a sensible idea. It just seems to me that maybe they've spent the last 6 months in a room and just went, right, sod all this other stuff. Let's just try and get people using this thing. Let's make it as easy as possible for people to buy Stadia. Let's give people more reasons to buy Stadia. people obviously are not buying it because of the Google attachment. It could be something else Stadia, you know what I mean? Because no one's buying it for like, oh, it's a Google thing. So it's like, get a bunch of games on and a bunch of titles from a bunch of developers and publishers that everybody knows. Make it super accessible. Let's get the user base up. Let's improve the product over the next couple of years. And then we can look at making our own stuff. Like if you look at, I don't know why they didn't do this in the first place, because it's literally a copy and paste job. If they'd looked at what Netflix and Amazon Prime had done, create a service that's full of great content, then make your own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't come out the gate swinging with your own stuff as well. You don't even know if the customers want that yet. Like Netflix didn't make Netflix originals straight away. Amazon Prime didn't do that. They put a bunch of stuff on there that people were willing to pay for. Then when everyone was like, oh, these are pretty good, then they went, right, now let's make our own cool stuff. Like Amazon went and spent a crazy amount of money for the rights to that Lord of the Rings thing, didn't they? Like $1 billion or something like that.
It was huge. It really was huge.
If they'd done that straight away, they probably would have gone under.
I think what Stadia should do, Google should do even for Stadia, just off the back of what you're saying, James, is they should do what Microsoft did and just start throwing some money around. And like Microsoft just bought the entirety of like Bethesda for like $7 billion. So now Microsoft really has ownership over like the Elder Scrolls and Fallout and Dishonored and a bunch of other big games. I think Doom's one of them as well. That's a big incentive. If they're only on Xbox, it's like, oh fuck, I can only play Elder Scrolls 6 or whatever the next one is on Xbox. That'll probably sway a lot of people over to buying that machine, or using Game Pass or something. Stadia, like Google is not a company that's short of cash. I'm sure there's a company out there. Like if they bought like Take-Two, you know what I mean? Not to say that they would, and they had the exclusive rights to put like GTA 6 on their platform. Imagine how many people would buy a Stadia after that. Just invest in third parties. Microsoft has done it. Sony sets up a lot of first-party studios, but they started nabbing third-party studios, I think, during the PS3 era, and it just did wonders for them. They made third-party studios first-party by owning them, or something like that, but I don't know how it works exactly. Yeah, just start buying stuff up, create some real competition between all these developers.
Yeah, that's a good shout. Buy up a studio that's proven itself, that already has a fan base, and then make it an exclusive on Stadia, and then there you go.
Bob's your uncle.
And you never know. We might be looking back at this thinking, we'd sort of maybe been a bit prophetic. Maybe Google's canned their own studio because they've looked at how much it's going to cost to set the thing up and went, actually, we could probably buy a studio that's already producing money. And maybe that's what will happen. They'll just go out and buy some, mid-range established studio and go, right, these are now Google Stadia exclusives.
Yeah. I mean, unlikely, but imagine if they bought something like Activision. That would just shift the entire industry. I mean, Activision's probably worth billions and billions and billions and billions at this point. It's probably not worth the investment, possibly. Yeah. But imagine if Call of Duty was only playable on Stadia. How much would that change things for everybody? Crazy.
I think that they should target more of the they could do a good job by targeting the casual gaming studios. I couldn't tell you who made it, but I'm thinking of things like Animal Crossing style.
You mean like Nintendo?
No, not an Animal Crossing style of game, not necessarily Animal Crossing, but those ones that are played by millions of people, and they're super popular, but it's for massively casual, mainly casual gamers. You could probably get them in on that because most of them will probably have a decent, a laptop that's fine but isn't amazing. I think you can play these games on your phone as well, can't you? And any device will play them. So most of these people have a phone, a tablet, a laptop. You could get quite a few users over by grabbing a title like that. Mid-range, well followed, well played kind of game like that. I think maybe would be a good idea.
To me, they kind of look like they don't really know what they're doing, long term. It feels like Stadia's been quite a reactionary thing, and obviously it probably hasn't. They've probably been developing it for years and years and years. But it feels like it's come out. There's still, it came out quite a while ago. There's still not a great deal of stuff on the platform. It's kind of limited again by its use of internet. Not everyone has access to great internet, and again, they go to set up a studio and they pretty much shut it down before there's a chance to do anything. It seems like they don't quite know what they're doing in this space just yet.
So do you think with this news and these developments that Google Stadia is worth getting or still supporting, or should you maybe, stay away from it until there's more developments? James, I'll go to you first.
This is quite fresh news, isn't it? So I would probably give it a month or two to see what the decision behind the decision is, if you know what I mean. Like, what's the decision behind the PR, behind the hype, behind everyone's reactions? And if actually in a month's time Google have added 10, 20 new major titles and said, oh, there's going to be hundreds more coming and blah, 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 I'd probably think, actually, if I was thinking about it before, I might think their focus now is just going to be on making this a really good experience for people and adding a bunch of titles I want to play to it rather than concentrating on something I don't care about. So I'd probably jump in, but I'd probably give it a month or two.
Archie?
Just wait, 100%. I would say no reason to invest in Stadia right now. Nothing against Google or anything like that. The idea of Stadia is fantastic. I just think there's more on other platforms that are, I think, more accessible, have more variety, and if you've got access to those things like Epic Game Store, Steam, Game Pass, if you've got a console, there's just more stuff on all those devices in Stadia.
I think you've just nailed that was exactly the point I was making before, Archie, is that Google's probably just finally realised that now and went, oh, shit, maybe we should add more stuff to this before we start asking people to pay for it.
Exactly. Yep, just wait. There's no rush. If you don't have any of these machines, I would still just wait.
Let the dust settle from all the reaction and then see what actually happens.
Amazing idea. I think it's fantastic that it's making games more accessible, but it really is, in terms of its own content, seems to be severely lacking.
Excellent. Well, shall we move on to the next news item? And this is more about the console scalpers. And this is in the UK in particular because the SNP, which is the Scottish National Party, they tried to introduce legislation to prohibit the resale of consoles and components greatly above the recommended retail price. And this is obviously this is in order to stop the scalpers for PS5 and Xbox Series, whatever letter it is, because that's just a terribly named console that's too confusing to remember. But this is not going to become law tomorrow. Essentially, what they've done is merely announced it. So we might be a bit away down the road before we actually see any of this coming to fruition or not, or it even being discussed in British Parliament. But I'd like to know, firstly from you, Archie, and then James, you can answer afterwards. Should we be legislating against scalpers? I know we think they're sort of annoying or whatever if you're trying to buy a console, but surely that's how the market works.
I think the problem is they're not doing anything inherently illegal. So there's nothing necessarily wrong with what they're doing. But in a way, it just seems a little bit kind of, I don't know, I don't know the right word for it, but it's they're just owning what they're making it almost impossible for a large number of people to get access to what they would like to buy, and it's like that. It's something quite dishonest about what they're doing, and this has gone on for yonks. You can concert tickets were scalped for ages, back in the day, but the means of which it's being done now is it seems that it's using bots and all that. It's using a machine to get ahead of everybody else. And I don't know if it's something that should be illegal or not. Not really, I guess. But at the same time, it does seem to be, I guess, a little bit of a problem. I don't know. I'm a bit unsure where I stand, because I don't want scalpers, but at the same time, you can't really stop people buying something and wanting to sell it on if they're so inclined to do that,
James?
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one. First of all, did either of us ever think we were going to bring up the Scottish National Party during a gaming podcast? I'm not sure if that was...
Nicky Sturgeon, man. Obviously.
Nick East. But yeah, in terms of I don't know. Of course, it's annoying. I don't think anyone who isn't a scalper wouldn't be annoyed by people who are scalpers. It's a unethical way to go on. You are buying something you know someone else wants purposefully to stop them from getting it, so you can then sell it to them at a higher price than you originally paid. It's a dick move. Let's just put it out there. But in the world we live in the market we live in, is it illegal? No. So should it be illegal? I don't know, because then I don't know what the repercussions of something like that are, because then I don't know what the butterfly effect of that would be, if that makes sense. I don't know how that would cause problems on other ways of buying and selling things and limiting people to buying a certain number of anything ever. Like, I don't know how that would work. So I honestly don't know. I think it's just one of those annoying things that we're just going to have to live with. At the minute, the manufacturers are not churning out enough supply to meet the demand, and that's causing the problem. Once that supply meets the demand, then the problem goes away. But it's just an unfortunate case of things. We're just going to have to put up with it. I don't know how you could possibly pass something like that into law, but I don't know. It's a tricky one.
Well, let's add a point to this where there was a news story where one of the scalpers was did an interview and was upset about the way they're being portrayed in media because basically everyone was saying they were dicks. And this guy, apparently it's Jordan from the lab. I don't think a surname was given, probably for obvious reasons. Apparently, they bought 25 PS5s and sold them at £700 each, with the retail price in the UK being £450. So it's not quite double, but it is probably like 170% markup or whatever. But he said he was a middleman, and that's what middlemen do. They just get money. But I would say the argument for middlemen is that you offer a service. You know, you make the product you're selling more accessible. So, you know, a supermarket is the middleman for farmers. You can go to farms and go buy their milk, and go to a different farm and get some beef, and go to another farm and get like another product. And in that case, you're going to spend a lot of petrol driving around large areas of land, going to every farmer in like an entire region to get your shopping. A supermarket puts it all in one place and makes it easier to get a hold of. But because they source all the stuff, put it in one place for you, they knock up the price to cover their costs and make a tidy profit. The scalpers aren't doing that, so you could argue that they're not middlemen. They are just restraining the supply and then marking up the price. If this was a guy who was like flying to Japan and buying 25 PlayStation 5s because they were out in Japan and not in the US, and then flogging them for more money, you could argue that at least he's delivered the PS5s to like the American market or the European market or something like that. So when it's that case, can we legislate against it?
Yeah, because I mean, you could argue that like the supermarket situation that you used there, the markup you could classify as like a convenience tax, but a scalper is making the purchase of something inconvenient because they've taken it from the place that was charging you the convenience tax. They've bought it from the middleman, so the middleman is no longer in the equation. They've just taken it, knowing full well that they're going to put a markup on the markup to sell to someone who wants it because the supply is so low and the demand is so high. It's not being a middleman. It's being a dick about it. Like you can't be a scalper and think you're doing something useful for anybody. You've taken something out of the hands of someone who wanted it. You didn't want it for the reason that it was being sold. You wanted it so you could put a markup on the markup, which is, you know, that's just a dick way to go on. There's no convenience about that. You're inconveniencing people at that point. You know, you're not providing a service, you're providing an annoyance.
So the way I see this is, if either of you have seen Narcos or know anything about Pablo Escobar, they would cut off roads, or they would just block roads and then charge people or threaten to kill them to let them through. Now, obviously, the scalpers aren't threatening to kill you, but they're essentially taking something convenient, inconveniencing you, and then charging you. And I'm fairly certain there's something illegal about it, or close to illegal about doing that. Now, obviously, people don't have to buy it.
No.
But I'm sure there's a name for it, like, you know, not racketeering or something like that, or, you know, threatening people for protection money if in the mafia is a similar kind of idea. Like, they add a service you don't want and then charge you for it.
Yeah. Because well, yeah, I mean, I guess we shouldn't go too far down that analogy because, yeah, it turns into you have to buy this service, otherwise we'll break your legs. No one's going to break your legs if you don't buy a PlayStation 5 off a scalper.
No, yet.
I mean, At the end of the day, I think obviously it's inconvenient, but not getting a PS5 is a little bit of a first world problem, especially given the current climate of today for most people, you know, where, like, people can't even really get to food banks and stuff, you know, because of, like, COVID. No, definitely, you know, like, not getting a PS5 is probably the best problem you could have, I guess. Not to say it's not annoying, And I think really, in terms of scalpers, I think there's more that could probably be done on the side of the, I don't know what they're called, the retailer, I guess, who's selling the product to kind of
Yes.
like, and it'll be a difficult job, but this could affect them long term on other products as well that come in. Like they get a new pair of, I don't know, like Nike trainers. They get scalped as well. Like so, I think there needs to be more infrastructure into kind of like websites or databases or whatever that looks for these bots that are essentially doing most of the grunt work when it comes to like picking up all these machines.
The problem with all this, where the idea is very good, the retailers themselves have literally no motivation to do this because, as far as they're concerned, they sold all their stock, so they're in no, they got in 25 PS5s and they all got sold. They don't care who to. So, obviously they want to keep all the customers happy, so they do say like one per customer or something like that, for example. And then they can act like they've been exploited by the scalpers, but at the end of the day, they don't care that much. They only have to be shown to care enough so that their customers don't think, oh, well, this retailer just sells to scalpers and doesn't care about us. So as long as they can look like they're caring, they don't actually have to do anything about it, which is a bit of a shame, which is where if the companies don't do it, if companies don't self-regulate, then that's when the government has to come in, I guess, and that's probably why they're bringing this up. But they're probably not planning to do anything about it. It's probably just a nice political move to look like you care.
Well, one thing they do
Archie?
do, I guess, is that they prohibit, at least Game did, the Game being, I guess, the only game retailer in the UK now, is that they restricted one machine per address. And yeah, me and my brother tried to get machines for ourselves, and like we both got one in our baskets and had it ordered and all that. Because it was going to the same address, mine got cancelled. So there is something in place. There is something in place, But again, there was a story. I don't know how true this was. This could have been absolute BS. But there was a story of one scalper who apparently nabbed like 200 machines in like one single purchase. And how they got around that, I have absolutely no idea. But yeah, I don't know. It's a bit ridiculous. What do you do?
Well, I guess since we don't want to turn this into the equivalent of like Prime Minister's questions or whatever, or turn this into a fully political debate, we should probably move on to our Q&A segment, which is probably not a Q&A segment, it's more of a tips segment, calling it Q&A. The questions and answers have already been given ahead of recording, and we're just going to chat about them. So basically how this works is, over on Twitter, we asked our followers initially what was the biggest problem facing indie devs. So we got a few answers about that, and the one recurring issue was marketing, getting your indie game noticed in an already crowded marketplace, and most devs obviously busy enough making a damn game, which is is not the easiest thing to do, especially with a lot of these devs working on their own. Marketing their game effectively, it seems to be one of their biggest problems. So I asked the question on Twitter, which marketing approach has worked best for your indie game? And we've each picked a tweet from the community that we think makes a really good point. So we'll read these out, and then we'll discuss the ideas from the community. So I'll start with mine because, well, I'm running the show. So I picked friend of the show, Long Play Games, said Twitter and Twitch have been by far the most successful, and the key bit is to genuinely be part of the indie community and not just think you can show up, request people show your game, and leave. You need to show up for all your fellow indie streamers and devs too. And I absolutely loved this comment, because there's one thing I see running our Twitter, is that people all want to show off their games, understandably. They want people to notice their games. But there's a lot of, and I mean this is maybe just Twitter in a nutshell, but there's a lot of people just kind of like shouting in the town square kind of mentality, say, hey everyone, look at my game, but they haven't went and looked at anyone else's game, but they expect this, they expect every other dev on their Twitter to check out their game and take the time to see what it is and have a go of it if they've got a demo or something like that, but haven't actually reciprocated the favour to anyone else and just spend all day maybe just posting on Twitter about their game, and never checking anyone else out. So I thought this was an excellent point from Long Play, and I do try and tell devs this when we do our Indie Wishlist Wednesdays and Screenshot Saturdays and stuff like that. Like, we are happy to like reshare your stuff. You know, you reply to our tweets, we'll reshare them, I'll wishlist them. What goes in the wish list ends up in our articles and in the demo disc and stuff like that. But I also always mention at the bottom of the tweet, go check out the other games as well. And all I can add to what Longplay said was just, you know, take the time, make somebody's day. I can't imagine being a solo dev or an indie dev in a small team is an easy time of it. And there's probably times when you doubt yourself and what you're making or whatever. And you know, every time you've had the tiniest bit of like interest from somebody or someone paying you a compliment, how much it means to you, pay it forward. Go do that for somebody else. Make their day.
It's about being part, like as I said, genuinely being part of the community, and that means, you know, probably most of the time getting involved without thinking about how you can sell your game. It's about being a valuable part of a community that helps each other out. You know, I can imagine it's quite a difficult thing, as you've said, to make your own game and then market it and it becomes successful. The only way that's going to happen is if people support you by buying the game. So you need a good community around you to help you do that. And the only way to build a genuine community and be part of one is to actually get involved with one in a meaningful way. That means, like, you know, not every single message is check out my game. Sometimes it's how can I help your game, or here's a game I saw the other week that looks great, or here's a question, or here's something someone's struggling with. How can we all come together to help that? But the problem is, as we've seen, so this is not me just making this up, this is, you know, anecdotal evidence, a lot of people making these indie games don't seem to want to do that, and a lot of it is just, you know, here's my game, check it out. Here's my game, check it out. Buy my game, buy my game. Yeah, it's not going to work.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's not so much collaboration, but it's I guess it is to a certain degree when you're kind of looking out for each other, and you don't know how further down the line those relationships you build up with other people by just, you know, supporting them as well, and hopefully they'd support you, might benefit you, you know, when their game's released. They might be able to promote you. When you release theirs, you can promote them. So, you know, it's just a relationship you can build, and it's something that really is, like, you know, it is a little bit neglected, I think. And it's more than just, like, supporting each other's, like, games and, like, each other. You can, like, share ideas, you can share tech problems, you can do all these things that would help each other make better products. Like, so let's look at a simple example. Back in the day when, on the PS1, Naughty Dog and Insomniac, two, like, I guess, you know, not so much opposing companies, they were under the PlayStation umbrella, but they would share tech, and they would help each other out, and, you know, those companies did really, really well, not necessarily because of that, but it's a strong relationship to have, be there for each other, you can help each other out, you can share people, you can share ideas, all these different things, support each other, and it's usually the quickest way to, you know, at least a little bit of success, in my eyes at least.
Yeah, like doing like a knowledge swap type of thing, knowledge trade.
Why
type
not?
Of thing.
Like that's how these things work. Look at Kojima Productions. He's got a strong relationship now with Guerrilla Games, and they're sharing tech. They use each other's engine, and they're sharing tech all the time. Two totally different companies making totally different games, but you know they're both incredibly successful. I know there's a big like AAA products, but at the same time, there's no reason that relationship couldn't fall down to an indie game. And to be honest, I think in those smaller teams where, you know, you've got like fewer people, but you've still got that same broad range of disciplines you need to fulfill, you know, supporting each other and sharing ideas is probably more crucial then than it is higher up in the AAA ladder.
Well, in an indie games sphere, if you're one person and then you reach out and get help with a problem from one other person, you've effectively doubled the brain power working on this problem.
They're saying exactly that, and the same goes for marketing the game. If you're on your own, shouting at everybody, telling them to look at your game, that's not going to work as well as being part of, say, a community of 50 indie game devs and fans, where you've all got to know each other, and you've all helped each other out, you've all created a genuine community, and all 50, you can maybe rely on, you know, 10 to 50 of those people to help you promote your game. You know, it's like orders of magnitude more effective than just you screaming about it from the, you know, from the game's own channel as well. Marketing looks way, like word of mouth from someone else saying, hey, you should check out this game. I've played it, it's fantastic, is is far more effective than the studio itself saying our game's great. Like, of course they're going to say that. So it's just about thinking longer term with that, and building communities is like one of the most powerful things you can do. Either
100%.
building them or being part of them when it comes to marketing a product is like super powerful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with that, I think we have to thank Longplay Games for the submission, and also thank you for supporting our community. We had a great time in our stream the other day, and Longplay was there supporting us. So we'll pay it forward. So I think if you have, well, if you have the time, go check out Longplay Games on Steam and their game Cygnus Pizza Race. The name doesn't sound like what it is. It's much more akin to Wipeout, which I know you're a big fan of, Archie.
I love a bit of Wipeout.
Hover car, jet racing, kind of crack on. Very cool looking game. So go check that out, guys. Should we move on to the point you've highlighted, Archie? You tell us who it's by and what they said.
Right, I'm probably going to get this wrong. The tweeter, I don't know what the tagline, what do you call that name?
The handle.
The handle, thank you. Is it Rick Ocklon? Am I saying that right? Possibly.
No idea.
RIKOCLON.
Excellent.
So what he said was, so far the biggest help for me has been strong promotional materials. For example, I hand-painted retro-style box art, and that has driven most of my clicks. Also, I'm iterating and posting GIFs of the progress nearly daily. And I think what stood out to me about this one, it's kind of like more of a creative approach to kind of getting your own product out there, rather than relying on kind of the text of kind of, we've just done this, and we've just done this, I mean, a picture says 1,000 words, I think, is the one you can come back to on this, and when you're on Twitter, I imagine that the Twitter stream all blurs together when it's nothing but text. And so, yeah, I'm not exactly sure how he's doing the approach of the retro-style box art, but I imagine that's quite unique. I can't say I've seen anybody else post something like that before. He's going out of his way to make something that will hopefully stand out amongst the crowd, and I think with the latter part of his point, posting GIFs on the progress he's doing, I think generally most people who are in the indie game space, even people who are just like consuming indie games, probably have at least a minor interest in how these things are put together and the creativity behind it. At least I am, and and I think it's good to see like something building up over time. Seeing one thing, even if it's a simple GIF, just seeing a bit of progress of something being made. I think that's more striking than seeing, obviously the final product was good, but to see how like the DNA of where that thing came from. It appeals to me at least, and I think that's why it stood out. I like to see how the meal is cooked, kind of thing.
James, anything to add?
It's kind of similar to the one that I picked out. The quote, it's very similar in that it's like showing up every day, isn't it?
Would you want to read yours out, and we can discuss them both together?
Yeah, sure. Mine was from at Moonlit Monitors. The tweet was, consistent effort, especially on Twitter. I really feel it when I take a week off. Not even from posting. Genuine interactions seem to be much more important. Using the community support, other devs and streamers, I believe, building connections and making the game pretty looks are everything. So, very similar, I guess, to the one Archie mentioned where the guy painted it, references specifically the artwork that has helped to drive a lot of the clicks. I would argue that, the looks of it are really important because I know the whole quote is that you shouldn't judge something by the look of it, but something that catches your eye is going to make you click on it and want to find out a little bit more. And if it does look different to something else, that's going to help. But I think, especially with what Moonlit Monitors was saying on my tweet, there was on their tweet, sorry, consistent effort. I think that's it. Just not taking a day off, or making sure that you come up with a consistent plan of promotion and sticking to it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just try it for a couple of days and then take 2 months off and then come back and try it again. Like, oh, why aren't I getting any sales? I imagine at this level, making a game either on your own or with a very small team with a very limited marketing budget, consistency of message and promotion is a massive difference maker. If you're doing it consistently and well, then it's going to help. And I like their additional mention as well of building connections with communities, other devs and streamers as well. It's important to have other people helping to push your message out in a genuine way, so it's not just, an affiliate link or something like that. It's it's a legitimate supporter of your game from your community who's helping you get your message out. But the key thing across all these tweets, I think, is all of these things take time. Making nice box art, turning up every single day, building genuine connections, building genuine community is not something you're going to achieve in 24 hours. This is going to be months of hard work. And if you want your game to be successful, then you've got to put in arguably more effort promoting it than you do creating it. And I know creating these games takes a hell of a lot of effort. So think about it that way.
Yeah. I mean, people aren't going to know you're there if you're not showing up every day, if you get me. Like, in whatever community you're in, you have to essentially be propping up the bar, as it were, to use a pub reference. But if you are, if you are a local, or is it a local? A regular, sorry. If you are a regular in these communities, it's very much like It's a Wonderful Life. Your good favor and, being there for the community, that all pays dividends when you need help. And, I guess call me maybe naive or maybe too optimistic, but I think people are inherently good and will show up for you when you need it. So if you have built these connections and are part of a good community that supports one another, I think you can expect to rely on people at a certain time. Obviously, you can't rely on them for everything. There is an effort you'll have to put into to market your own game. And the recurring themes in this one is that as much as, you don't need ultra high-res textures or everything like that, some good visuals do go a long way, especially when it comes to promotion, especially on social media as well. Like Archie, you said, on any kind of social media feed, images and videos tend to perform much better than just text. And also you've got the idea of seeing a game being made over time. And you're right with this one, Archie. I think that's something that interests a lot of people who look into indie games. People who like indie games sort of like the artisanal approach to them, as it were. You can see them being made. They're not behind these blackouts or anything like that, like a AAA game where you're like, information just gets leaked out, and the information that gets leaked out is like, attached to, thousands of NDAs, and no one can say anything about it. And then when you do see something from the studio, you're not even sure if that's the final product, a la Cyberpunk, And with an indie game, it seems that even that, indie games celebrating like their little victories and problems and bugs and their like the challenges they face, I think really personalizes the whole approach. Like people can see like an indie dev that posts something they struggled with, or a bug that occurred, or some issues they were having, even just watching them on a day-to-day basis overcome these issues and resolve bugs is like a heartwarming process. And when you see someone's final project released that you've been watching on social media, as you said, Archie, seeing the meal get made is a wonderful experience. And then you want to buy that game. You're like, oh my god, I remember when they first showed their little like sketches of this game, and now it's here, and I'm excited about it because I've seen it come to fruition.
Let's use another example. Let's look at so Double Fine, when I think they were kind of on their last legs, and they did that Kickstarter. Fair enough, this is like a Kickstarter thing, and Double Fine had a bit of clout. They followed it up with that, while they were making the game, they had this ongoing kind of like documentary. And fair enough, they had a documentary team and blah, 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 blah. They had a bit of clout, but I mean, I think that went a long way to getting them like even more attention than they already had. Like this process of how this is made, how this is getting put together from start to end. And I think, you obviously don't need something as high production levels as that, but yeah, just show off the process. I think it works wonders as a means of kind of advertising.
Yeah, it just makes your potential future customers feel like they've been part of the journey, especially if you're part of a really good community and you're being genuine about it. They feel like they're... it's almost like it's like giving you those people that are going to be your early adopters, like behind the scenes looks. Like people love that sort of stuff, and if it's genuine to say if you're part of a really good community of people, then yeah, they almost feel like they've been part of your journey and they've probably maybe influenced some of the decisions along the way as well, give feedback, and you probably feel like they've been part of your journey. It creates a nice situation for buyers and for the creator, doesn't it? So that's always going to be a good thing.
The take home there is participate in the community, and I'd like to thank the people who participated in ours, Long Play Games, Rick Oaklon, and Moonlit Monitors, and a thank you to the other people whose tweets we haven't read out but also still replied to us. I know that there were responses to these tweets that other people found very useful as well. There were people chatting on Twitter in these threads, asking each other questions back and forth and sharing information with one another like we were just talking about. So it's something that's great to see, and it's something that I hope we can continue to nurture at Indie Bandits. So thank you for participating and continuing to celebrate indie games with us. I guess we'll move on to our game now. We'll talk about the game that we've been playing for this month's podcast, and I am expecting mixed reviews. I'm just going to say we picked nuts. It's such a terribly named game given the meaning of the word nuts. To just you can't use it in a sentence and keep your mind out of the gutter. But Nuts is a stylized first-person puzzle and narrative game in which you play a student researcher whose job is to monitor squirrel behavior by placing cameras in the woods, leaving them overnight, and watching the recordings back the following day to work out where squirrels go. And we played this on Twitch for our indie impressions. The video of that's available on our YouTube. And to be fair, there's no spoiler warnings in this video because we didn't really talk much about the game because we had such a good time. But if you do want to come and hang out in our next stream, then I might add we may not talk that much about the game we're actually playing. But it was an excellent time was had by all. But I don't know if that was down to the game. I played it and enjoyed it, but I'd like to first hear your impressions, James, and then Archie's.
When we did the stream, I got the impression that it wouldn't be a game for me, and then when I played the game, I realised that impression was probably correct. It didn't strike me as... Well, it's not the sort of game I would play. The art style was certainly unique. I've not seen another game like that, but it was a bit garish for me. It was a bit headache-inducing. The gameplay itself was very repetitive and monotonous. I know that some people would enjoy the relaxing nature of it, and it certainly was. There was no moments of stress or anything. Well, apart from one moment, but it's not really a moment that actually you can do anything about. I found it really boring, if I'm being honest. I couldn't get into it. I found it boring. It's not my type of game at all. So I'm probably not the best person to talk about this. It wasn't a game. I didn't feel like I was being challenged at any point, and that's what I guess that's what I want out of a game, is I want a challenge, and this was as basic as a challenge comes.
Okay, Archie?
I thought the art style was okay, but I understand James's problems with it, and I kind of agree in some cases that yes, it did occasionally get very garish. I found the gameplay pretty monotonous. Actually, I found it incredibly monotonous. I found the story a little bit unengaging. I liked peaceful nature of it, but I kind of felt I wasn't particularly invested in what was going on. And I've got nothing against squirrels, but I just didn't really care about looking for where these squirrels were hiding. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that the story itself, that the actual story was not bad. It did
enough to keep you
yeah,
plodding
to
along.
Oh, okay, right. I wonder. I mean, it's obvious from the beginning. I found it was pretty obvious from the beginning what was happening. It's certainly not like it's a head twister or anything.
M. Night Shyamalan
yeah,
kind of crack on. There's none of that going on.
But there was some nice touches in the story with some between the person who gives you the jobs and what you experience on the jobs. There's some nice back and forth there, and it sort of progresses nicely, but it's still not. It wasn't enough to get me gripped into it or enjoying it really.
Yeah, the loop wasn't engaging enough or clever enough to kind of I'm so sorry to the devs. I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but it's it just didn't grab me. Like, it felt like a long follow the leader kind of mission. You know what I mean? But you kept having to take extended breaks just to go to the next section, and it just came to a point where I kind of like, oh, I'll just come back to this later, and ultimately didn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I liked the atmosphere of it. I liked the music. I thought the music is just something I would probably just listen to in my spare time to relax, you know? And I think they did a good job with the acting and stuff, and kind of giving the person on the phone a bit of character. But outside of that, I like Walking Simulator. I like Dear Esther, and I like Everyone's Gone to the Rapture, and there's probably another one I'm forgetting right now. But this, I think, because it did kind of like hinder on this gameplay loop, and because that to me wasn't engaging enough, I didn't feel the need to kind of like continue playing after I'd done like a couple of hours of it.
Yeah, it's not a very long game either, so even after a couple of hours, you're essentially about 70% of the way through it, I'd say. So, James, your opinion doesn't surprise me. I didn't think this would be your kind of game. Archie's, yours does a bit, because like you said, you've enjoyed walking simulators in the past, and I haven't really. I've never been that into them. I've played Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, and I was just like, I didn't even, like, that was just same opinion as James had of this game. I was like, I don't know why I'm here. Why am I bothering to walk around this sleepy English village, which is what happens in Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, and then story elements are slowly leaked to you, which is I guess how these games kind of work. The reason they're called walking simulators, I guess, is because you just walk around and then exposition is slowly delivered to you as you walk around. So that's where the chill nature of it comes. But I thought this one would maybe be the game that like ties together, I guess, sits on the fence between the kind of experience Archie likes and enough gameplay in it that you would like, James. But I think maybe it's ended up as a bit of a halfway house that's just pleased neither of you.
I was trying to work out whether am I not enjoying this as much as I could, because like you've mentioned, like I do like that, like Firewatch. I thought that was a good but not great game kind of thing. And I was wondering if it's just because I've been sat in this house for the last year, you know what I mean? Like I haven't had the opportunity to go out as much, and the idea of sitting in here and just playing something that's very slow paced, because my life's been very slow paced for the past year, like, you know, home and everything, that it just wasn't the mindset I needed. I wasn't in the right mindset to play that game, you know? And there's nothing wrong with it. Like, really, it works, and you can play it, and you do this and that, and I don't know, I couldn't be asked to put those cameras down after doing it, like, the 8th time, you know? Go back, go forward, go back, print the picture off, do this. I'm like, oh, man, because is there no way you could, like, streamline this to make it, like, a bit more engaging or a bit more interesting? Like, you know? It's just, like, that's what I felt.
Yeah, it's just this wasn't situational for me. This just isn't my type of game. I've never ever been drawn to games where essentially you're not really doing that much. I know, and that's not me being detrimental towards it, because I know people enjoy those games, but I just prefer where there's like a bit more going on that you've got to do. You know, and the loop, the gameplay loop is a little bit more complex as well. Like this was very, you know, pick up camera, put camera down, watch camera, pick up camera, put camera down, advance slightly further down the map each time. Like, yeah, you know, again, like Archie, I mean, you know, obviously it's an opinion, right? I don't like FIFA, and that's a huge game. It's extremely popular. So I just don't like these types of games. I'm sure people who like relaxed walking simulators that are just sort of pleasant experiences will probably quite enjoy this. It looks different. And like the game itself is like polished. I did get stuck. I went off the map at one point. I did find a way to get off the map, and I got stuck in a rock for a bit. That was a bit annoying, but that was my fault because I was trying to be daft. But the rest of the game, like it's polished. You know, it works.
Yep.
Each of the little bits you have to do is like very well thought out. It's just not my type of thing at all. Like at all.
That's really funny because I mean I did not expect you to like this, James, but I thought, you know, it'd be interesting to sort of like make you try it. Like I guess in the same way you make someone try sushi, and every so often, you know, you might find someone who is just dead against the idea and is like, oh my god, this is great.
Yeah.
But I also think, Archie, you're right that these kind of games also take a certain mood, and exactly the way you put it is, I guess, you don't want a chill experience in a year where every day kind of gets a bit boring and monotonous and repetitive. I think these games kind of probably work better if you have like a really busy, hectic life, the kind of like getting up early, commuting to work, squeezed onto a, metro or bus or anything like this. If you have that kind of like really chaotic, moving around a lot lifestyle, then a couple hours on this once you get home would probably be quite nice. And in the other way, we're now probably yearning for something that's really escapist and exciting.
Yeah, I think so.
That said, I did really enjoy it, but I think I was in a good headspace for it as well, because I went back to replay the puzzles we'd solved on stream, which were very few because we weren't paying that much attention. I realised it's a lot easier to just play this game on your own when you're not chatting about all sorts of nonsense like we were on the stream the other day. But I thought I also wasn't paying that much attention to the narrative, which I know is important to these games, which is why I was like, right, I have to start this from scratch and listen to what the characters are saying to me so I can get invested in the story. But also, I played it on a day where I woke up really early, finished all my work for the day and the following day, and then realised I just like freed up 48 hours of my schedule and was kind of like, well, isn't this nice? I think I'll just play through this game in one sitting, and I did, and I feel that probably helped that I was just in a good mood, nothing to worry about, not feeling like, oh my god, I could have been doing something exciting in this time. I was like, oh man, I'm free as a bird. And that game kind of really worked well for that kind of, I guess, emotional state, as it were, because I certainly do think a lot of games are situational. I think that, same with films and books and whatever, that, you're not always in the mood for an action film. Some, other times you might not be in a mood for a really, really long black and white art house film, but you can probably enjoy both if you find the right time of day. Obviously, like the slow burner art house film, if you've never liked them, you may never have a mood for them, which
yes.
Which I feel might be your case, James. This is just a games that you've never really enjoyed, and I don't think this would have been the one to change your mind on it.
No, it's not for me.
Yeah, I just wasn't engaged. Sorry to say, nothing wrong with the game. I just wasn't engaged. Really care.
I think you're right about the loop, though. I think there was definitely something they could have maybe done to like you said, streamline or speed up the loop. Because I think one problem with it was potentially you place the cameras and then you always have to go back to your caravan to watch it, which is a nice like narrative element. But when you've like walked to the other end of the map to place these cameras, and then you go, oh my god, now I have to walk all the way back across this across the terrain to sit down and then watch it back. If there was like a fast travel back to the caravan,
yeah, definitely,
that would probably go a long way to improve it, and maybe you'd miss out of some of the zen and environment, but you'd benefit from not feeling the monotony of the gameplay loop.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I feel like when you have something like that, take a horror game for example, when they intentionally put back and forward kind of traversal into it, so you're always going back to another place. And the point I always take from that is you set something up as being safe, and then when you have to go back, you surprise your player and you put in something that they might not have expected that wasn't there previously. You know what I mean? Like, you give them that scare. And I felt like with this, and I don't want to be that dickhead like, oh, the game should have this to be better just for me. You know what I mean? Like, but it's like I felt that back and forth they missed an opportunity to like help tell the story a bit more, or put something else in there that would have pushed the story along further. Does that make any sense? Like, you're constantly going back and forward, but nothing's happening between those
moments
two.
Are wasted.
A to B to C moments. It's like, few times you do it, it's the same monotony. Then maybe on the like fourth or fifth time, something changes that intrigues you as the player, and that's when you start the ball rolling to propel your story forward. Like, I mean, I'm not a dev. I'm just some arsehole with like, oh, this is what I would do, and it probably wouldn't work in practice anyway. But to me, when I've seen something like an example, I know Resident Evil 2 is not a walking simulator, it's a horror game, but they give you a single environment that you constantly are walking around till you know it in and out. But they use those backtracking moments to try and like push the story forward, or to put something in there to get you like scared and motivated, so you're more fearful about going back there in the future. You know, I felt the game missed the opportunity to do something not in the horror aspect, but in a way of like pushing the story forward, putting something else in there to get you intrigued.
Yeah, I completely get you. If those backtracking moments were used for narrative exposition rather than where most of the narrative comes from is once you're back at the caravan, you look back over the footage you've recorded, and then you either you print out a photo and fax it back to the head researcher, and then she gives you a call, and then you have a phone call, and it's nice because that's a little like reward for having completed your task. But as you said, once you've placed the cameras down, it might have been a good idea to have that backtracking moment used for exposition and have, like you said, some way to just progress the story. There are like cassette tapes and stuff you can listen to in it, but they're more world building than inherently like progressing the plot forward. So, you know, it might have changed the whole style if like the player had a mobile phone and could answer that on the way, and she rang you on the way back going, cool, the cameras are placed, let me tell you about this, and it takes about just as long as it does to get back, because GTA does this all the time with every mission where you have to drive somewhere. They're like, well, we'll just have the narrative take place in the car journey, and that works a treat.
I think like DRS did this as well, another walking simulator, where I think when there's a long bits of walking, I'm sure the music changes and there's narration given to you. I might be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's how I remember it. Like when I was playing this game, this might have happened later on in the game, but I expected after the, you know how it's in different sets, essentially, because you go to different locations. I expected after like one of the first few nights in the second set of the game that I would come up to the cameras and they'd be like mangled and broken or something. Like, but when I played it, that never happened. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, something would get changed up, and yeah, it. I mean, is it a spoiler?
Spoiler.
I guess skip the next 5 seconds if you're worried about spoilers, but nothing like that happens in the game.
Yeah, see, like, seems like a missed opportunity for a very sweet idea.
Yeah, the narrative is a nice little story, well told, and you could criticize the game in itself for being quite short, which I would say, you buy a game at the price point, I think it was around £15. For around £15 for 3 and a bit hours, you're like, oh man, I've bought games around that price that have been with me a lot longer and been much more enjoyable. Mm-hmm. But like, the one I would say that I bought for a similar price that had that I really enjoyed was Outer Wilds. But in the same vein, neither of you's really got into that, but that was like the best game I played last year for me. But I paid a similar price for that, and I got far more hours of enjoyment out of that. And that had something I thought this game would have and didn't, like more like real like wow eureka moments. I really thought like this is what the gameplay was leading to, if you get me. Like the idea that you follow these squirrels back and forth, and the way you essentially progress is you see where a squirrel leaves your shot, and then you place the camera the following day where you thought it goes, because the squirrels follow the same routes every day, and you repeat this pattern until you find it's the squirrel's like end destination and work out where it's stashing its nuts, essentially. And it never really used that moment where you finally like work out something clever about where they went and go, oh, I've got the sucker now, or something like that. It's always just like, yeah, that's the direction I thought it was going in, and it did, and now I've placed the camera down. And I guess to reiterate your point, Archie, it's a good start and a good working game. Potentially, what I would say is a lot of missed opportunities.
It would have been nice if there was a little bit more going on in the game, and they kind of hinted it. Like there's clearly something going on that's a bit dodgy, but you only ever hear more about that on the phone call.
Yeah.
And it's like someone else is doing that job, and like I remember there was one really frustrating bit where there was like you had to take a picture of a bunker and match it up to an old photograph, and the sort of revelation that comes out of that is that there's something sinister going on, and then like this just one thing really like frustrated me when the person on the phone said, right, I'll get onto this, you just keep doing what you're doing. I was like, oh my god, I want to do something that's not what I'm doing. Like like there's tension going on in the story, but it's all going on separate from what I'm doing. Like I want to do the tension stuff. Like give me that rule, and you go around taking videos of squirrels. You know, like there was again, like, you know, I didn't make the game. It's their creative vision. It's their choice. But I wouldn't have done it that way. It's not my sort of game, and I feel like yes, there was maybe a couple of missed opportunities with the story, and maybe some small changes to be made in the loop that was going on, as you said, like things like running back to the caravan to watch your recordings could have easily had some more story dropped into it, or history behind the forest, or something about the even just down to like something as daft as the species of squirrel that you're tracking, like would have been quite interesting. Like just a little bit of extra information.
What I get from these games is that the story is always told by what you read and what you're told and what you can see in the environment. I didn't really get any of that from this, really. Like, I compared it to Resident Evil 2 for some stupid reason before, but I think a better comparison would be the game Gone Home, where the game is essentially the same thing, but it's set in a house. Sorry, the same thing as in it's a walking simulator, but this one's set in a house. Sets you up believing that the game's going to be one thing, and by the time you've finished it, it's something completely different. But as you go along playing this house, you learn pretty much everything about this family that's lived here, what's going on, what troubles they've had in the past, and it's kind of fascinating for that reason. And a lot of this is just told visually, by things you could see, by going into the different rooms. There's notes you can read, and there's narration that's fed back to you. But by the end, you've got a good, clear picture of, oh, what's gone on. But it also has these moments of like where you think it's one type of game, like, but switches up and it becomes another, and it's like it's quite clever like that. And there's things to be discovered and found, and puzzles to solve, and I think that game is better than this one. And it's shorter and the same price, and I bought Gone Home for like 15 quid, and I never felt ripped off because I just enjoyed it so much. Well, if I'd paid 15 quid for this one, I wouldn't feel I'd got my money. Sorry to say.
That's fair. I think the one praise I'd like to level at this is this is the first game by this group of people, I believe. This is my understanding. This is I don't think it's the first game they've made independently, but I think the people involved, this is the first game they've made together as this particular group. And I think it certainly shows a lot of potential, and I don't mean
100%.
that in there like when you do shit work at school and your teacher says you've got potential. It's like, no, I think this is genuine potential. I think, like we said, there's a lot of opportunities have been missed, but there's also a lot of promise. Like, you know, kudos to them for going with the whole squirrel idea. I did like that puzzle. I don't think it's a strong enough game mechanic to stand on its own. I think there needed to be just like a second or third mechanic in the game just to flesh it out, because as we said, the squirrel watching, it's a cool idea, and I like the physical, like, spatial awareness puzzles it offers, but I don't think it was enough to create a really riveting loop. And the way the exposition was delivered to you also wasn't as effective as it could have been, but, you know, that said, the exposition is still good. The story's still good. It's just, as you said, James, it always feels like it could go a little bit further. It always feels like it's teetering on the edge of something like really mad about to happen, and it never does.
It's happening somewhere else as well. Like that's you know, it's like it's happening through this person on the phone. Like, isn't there one bit where it's just like, oh, no, I can't explain. But there's like a bit of tension when you call her up one time, like there's a situation going on, and it's like, oh man, that sounds mad. But like,
I wish I was watching this instead of squirrels.
Yeah, it's not happening to me. And like, you know, polished game. I'm sure they'll learn plenty from it. And I'm sure some people will be well into it. Just I wasn't one of them.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I don't think this game's like a dud, like, at all or anything like that. I think it's a great achievement that they've managed to put something together like this, and, you know, they've obviously just made what they wanted to make, and I think that's absolutely class. Just, yeah, wasn't for me either, unfortunately. Not to say it's a bad game or anything like that, just didn't appeal to my own tastes.
Yeah, I think it's a game that obviously, if people have played similar games in the past and can go into it hearing what we've said and maybe not set their expectations too high, then I think there's a lot of people who would enjoy this, who are looking for something just relaxing to churn away a couple of hours, but don't go in expecting to be completely gripped by this. Go in and expect, I guess, just mild and casual entertainment. I think that's the best way. You know, put the kettle on, make yourself some like mint tea, and just like, you know, just really, really relax as much as possible and go, I'm not gonna be like breaking any of the keys on my keyboard during this game.
No.
Just expect a very, very relaxed and very, I guess, I don't want to say underwhelming because it sounds unfair, but like
Just a chilled out experience, isn't it?
yeah, just prepare. If you want to sit down and chill, if you've had a tough day at work, stressed, and you don't want to think about anything else, just look at some squirrels. I think I really liked it because back home, my parents' house is near the park.
Joe would often be found walking around with 3 cameras.
Exactly.
You went to prison for that, though, didn't you?
I'm just looking at squirrels, I promise.
But yes, I think it's a game worth checking out, and certainly have a look and a big think about it before you do buy it, knowing what we've said here, that if you've got money to burn and then 15 dings is no option, then, and you've liked games like this in the past, then probably take a punt. But if you're on the fence about this and this kind of game isn't your crack on, then you might want to just avoid it.
No, I would fully agree.
Excellent. Well, sorry we couldn't be more positive on that one, but I think we leveled some fair criticism at that game, and and also some fair praise. We'll leave the discussion of nuts there, and just thank you for listening, and thank the people who participated in our community-based stuff. It's nice to know there are people out there who will join in with this kind of crack on, and we'll keep doing that if it works for people. And don't forget to obviously subscribe, leave a review, whether you like nuts or not. Leave a review. Leave the 5 stars nuts could have got as a rating for this podcast episode. But again, we've said this is all about community. Tell your friends, tell people you know, tell anyone you know who has any interest in celebrating indie games with us. Yeah. If you know someone who likes to listen to podcasts a lot, say, here, there's 3 Geordies who chat about indie games and all sorts of nonsense, and you can find their podcast, and that'll help us out a lot, I believe. And obviously, come check us out on social media. If you're a dev, Twitter and Discord are probably the best ways to find us, and probably the most valuable ways we can help building this community together. Thanks for listening, and keep celebrating indie games with us. Ta-ra!
Ta-ra.
See ya.